Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. I'm delighted to be with you to recollect the glorious program we had in Jaipur. Our stay in Jaipur with Srila Prabhupada in January 1972 was distinctive for a few reasons. One was that our Jaipur Hare Krishna program was organized by two ladies, my dear god sisters Kaushalya and Srimati Prabhus, who we are all fortunate to hear from directly. Another unique feature of this trip was the installation and worship of the beautiful deities, Sri Sri Radha, Govinda, at our Hare Krishna Pandal. To install these large marble deities, Srila Prabhupada had Yamuna Devi bathe and dress small Radha Krishna deities while in his presence. And from that ceremony, Srila Prabhupada said the large deities were installed. Also at this pandal, Tamal Krishna Goswami took sannyas. Before the ceremony, Tamal Krishna Goswami told me emphatically to take photographs of every aspect of the procedures and from every possible angle, which I tried to do. These events certainly make our visit to Jaipur remarkable. Yet, what stands out for me most was the worship of the Radha Govinda deities who'd been residing in the Queens of Jaipur's compound for 450 years. Every morning, I and others on Srila Prabhupada's party joined the hundreds of townspeople who daily gathered in the dark at the temple's locked gates. When the guards opened these gates at 4:30 a.m., all these exuberant devotees ran across the expansive lawn crying, Jai Radha Govinda, Jai Radha, Jai Govinda. I intended to walk to the temple, but as I was surrounded by sprinting people, I started sprinting too, thinking, wow, they do this every day. Such heartfelt enthusiasm. The Vaishnavas in Jaipur were truly unforgettable. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Okay, so now I'm going to read Kausalya Devi Dasi's letter that she has written about Radha Govinda of New York. She says, high anxiety filled the city of New Delhi in December 1971. A war had just begun between India and Pakistan. Amid this turmoil, we were planning the largest and most elaborate Pandal program since arriving in India. Sirens would announce the nightly blackouts as blissful devotees arrived from America and Europe to join the India mission. Among the new arrivals was Srimati, my good friend and god sister from Los Angeles. Srimati and I had a wonderful history. We'd spent many evenings together chanting in Hollywood, led by our dear godbrother, Vishnu Jana, and were his collaborators during the transcendental puppet shows he created. Don't let the kitty in. One of Srimati's jobs in India was to purchase deities for the New York temple. But since she had never been to India, she needed a guide. So Srila Prabhupada asked me to go with her to Jaipur. Although young, I had just turned 20. I'd been in India since we first arrived in October 1970, so I was considered seasoned at navigating the complexities of the country. One thing I learned very quickly about our beloved Gurudev was he always expected us to rise to the task. So off we went to Jaipur. In Jaipur, the artisans are the very best. That's too much to go back. In Jaipur, the artisans make the very best white and black marble deities. The Pink City is an incomparable jewel in the crown of Rajasthan, founded in the 1700s by Maharaj Sawal Jai Singh II, the ruler of Amber. We arrived by train from New Delhi late at night and went to a hotel. While checking in, Srimati realized she'd left her passport in Delhi. At first, the hotel clerk was going to turn us away, but finally agreed to let us stay. Tired from our journey, we were lulled to sleep by the sounds and smells of this magical city. At 4 a.m., we jumped out of bed, eager to attend Mangal Aarti at the famous Govinda Ji Mandir. In the chill of pre-dawn, we got on rickshaw, wrapped in wool shawls, and made our way to the temple. In November, Srila Prabhupada had taken the devotees on a tour of Vrindavan. When we visited Rupa Goswami Govinda Dev Mandir there, he told the story of the deity. Over 5,000 years ago, Sri Krishna's grandson, Vajra Anaba, had 3 deities carved according to descriptions of Krishna given to him by Parikshit's mother, Uttara. And Govinda Deji was the 3rd and most perfect. But as the millennia passed, the deity was lost. Then in the 1500s, he revealed himself to Rupa Goswami in Vrindavan, and the temple was built. When the Muslim emperor Aurangzeb tried to demolish the temple, destroying 4 of its 7 stories, Sri Sri Radha Govinda Dev were taken to Jaipur. Under the patronage of the pious ruler, the deities were protected in the king's palace. The Aarti was beautiful, and we were inspired by enthusiasm, pure joy, and love the deities had for Radha Govinda Devji. The devotees had for Radha Govinda Devji. After the ceremony, we began singing bhajans in front of the temple. Soon a crowd had gathered, surprised to see 2 American girls who knew their culture. When we stopped singing, the people began asking questions, and I told them about Srila Prabhupada and how he had taught us everything we knew. As the crowd dispersed, the Goswami and Pujari of the temple came to speak to us. We had an instant connection. He was kind and warm and said he hoped we would come again. We promised to visit the temple every morning while we were in Jaipur. Upon returning to our hotel room, we were met by the police. The hotel clerk had informed the authorities that Srimati was traveling in India without the proper documents, so we were taken to the police station. The Indian-Pakistan War had made all Americans suspect, since India's ally was Russia and Pakistan's ally was United States. We told the police that we were devotees of Krishna and friends of the Pujari of Govinda Devji Mandir, so they called the Goswami to check on our story. He came to the station and recalled our singing and devotion and proclaimed that we were actually devotees. Not only did he vouch for us, he invited us to stay in his home with his family. The police finally relented under the condition that we would not leave Jaipur until Srimati's passport was sent from New Delhi and presented to them. Okay. Through the mercy of Krishna and Srila Prabhupada, what might have been a disaster became a great opportunity. Goswami was a gracious host. He guided us to the best murti wallas in the city, and we began a daily program at the temple after Mangal Aarti. We would sing bhajans and tell everyone who gathered about Srila Prabhupada. We would tell them about Srila Prabhupada. As the crowd continued to grow, Goswami moved our daily program to one of the city palace porticos, facing the reflecting pool. Everyone was so enthusiastic that many respected families invited us to their homes for programs. We soon realized that they must meet Srila Prabhupada. We suggested that they sponsor a Pandal program, and several prominent businessmen agreed. Each man paid for a different part of the program, one for traveling the devotees and Prabhupada from Bombay, another for the accommodations, another for the food, another for advertising, and another for the Pandal tent and decorations. I persuaded Goswami to let Prabhupada live in a residence on the temple grounds and allowed the Pandal to take place in the vacant field behind the temple. While I was tied up with preparations for the Pandal program, Srimati got busy finding deities for New York. Srimati and I had both fallen in love with the beautiful conch shell eyes of Radha Govinda Devji and thought it would be wonderful to have deities like them in America. Srimati visited the finest Murti Wala and saw them, a beautiful black marble Krishna and white marble Radharani with conch shell eyes. When Srila Prabhupada and the devotees arrived, there was great jubilation in the city. He was very pleased with the deities and wanted to have an installation ceremony as part of the Panda program. And since the ceremony was to take place next to Govinda Devji, he named them Radha Govinda. During the 5-day program, the Maharani of Jaipur invited us to her place. I went there with Srila Prabhupada, Devananda Swami, and Shyamasundar. The Maharani was so impressed with Srila Prabhupada that she offered to donate an elegant old residence on the grounds of the city palace. The next day, we toured the building, and although it needed some renovations, Prabhupada loved it. He asked me to stay in Jaipur to finalize the transaction along with Devananda Swami and a new Indian devotee. Unfortunately, her family would not allow it, and we never received the building. I think this incident may have been the source of the story that the deities were given to us by the Maharani. However, that is not actually what happened. The Panda was a great success, and afterwards, Radha Govinda were shipped to the New York temple. When the American devotees saw the deities with their conch shell eyes, they felt it was too much for Westerners and decided to modify the deities. They removed the conch shell eyes to make them more acceptable. Prabhupada was not happy when he found out what had happened, what had been done, but it was too late. They were already on the altar in New York, so he let it go. And that is how Radha Govinda came to live in New York. Haribol, Hare Krishna. I am now going to partially read and partially tell about my time in Jaipur. So I will, this of course we know is Radha Govinda's 50th anniversary, February 6, 2022. Yahoo. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachani Nirvisesa Sanyavadi Praskachadasana Jai Srila Prabhupada Haribol Hare Krishna. So in a few words, I will set the scene as to how I came about getting the opportunity to serve New York, Sri Sri Radha Govinda. From Los Angeles, New Dwarka Temple, to Mal Krishna. That's in my way.
I don't know.
Okay. From Los Angeles, New Dwarka Temple, Tamal Krishna sent Jayananda and I to Berkeley to set up a temple in a house on Durant Street, about a block from Berkeley campus. I had been missing Srila Prabhupada, and he wrote a letter saying, I wrote a letter to him saying, Srila Prabhupada, I was quoting a poem from Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur. Srila Prabhupada, you are my mother, father, lover, son, Lord, preceptor, husband. Srila Prabhupada, you are everything to me. Srila Prabhupada wrote back, my dear daughter, Srimati Dasi, the love you are expressing for me is meant for Krishna. I am your eternal father, he said. Jai Srila Prabhupada always wanted an eternal father who could teach me the absolute truth. I am so grateful you are here with me forever. Okay. Srila Prabhupada was coming to Los Angeles, so I left Berkeley and went to the New Dwarka Temple to see him. As I was coming down the alley from the laundromat near the temple, Srila Prabhupada was coming back from his morning walk with so many devotees all about him. Srila Prabhupada called out to me, Srimati, is everything okay? Yes, Srila Prabhupada, everything is good. I have come to see you only. Srila Prabhupada said, Srimati, when are you coming to India? Ecstatically, I said, right away, Srila Prabhupada, as soon as I get the money together. He said, very good. Previously, the women devotees that went to India were only those who were with their husbands. Since I was not married, I did not go. Until now, I got a personal invitation from Srila Prabhupada. So I stayed on in New Dwarka and established a healthy prasadam candy business. There were Bhakti balls made from dried fruit and rolled in coconut, Shakti balls made from honey and sesame seeds, and bliss balls made from cacao and peanut butter. Chaitanya Dasi helped me out in the kitchen every night, and her husband drove me in a van along the California coastline to sell the sweet balls that had been bagged and tagged and ready to get new orders from the health food stores. This all turned out very well. I needed a round-trip ticket. I sold the business to the temple and flew to New York, where my friend Rukmini had married Bharadwaj, and was the head pujari at the time. So the London Ishwara deities were the first very large marble deities in the movement. They were tall, white marble deities, very beautiful. These were the first deities of the movement. And Rukmini wanted beautiful black marble Krishna, like some deities in India we had heard about, as well as a beautiful white marble Radharani. She gave me money to buy the first black marble Krishna with Radharani. She also asked me to purchase a flute, chaitra, staff, jewelry, and silk saris for their dress. Radha Govinda must be very eager to come to New York, as they seem to have been guiding us through the whole adventure of bringing them to New York. Everything happened so wonderfully and went on so perfectly smooth, ready and available to us. I entered India in New Delhi, October 20th, 1971, which also coincides with my October 20th, 1968 initiation by Srila Prabhupada in Seattle 3 years earlier, on the date, very same date, 3 years later. The devotees in New Delhi were setting up a huge Pandal program, and Srila Prabhupada would soon be there. This is what a Pandal program looks like. Prabhupada there, the deities in the middle, and the devotees all over the place. Yeah, so someone in New Delhi told me I could exchange money for the highest value on the black market. I went alone to exchange Rukmini's money. I made the exchange, but it was potentially dangerous. Since Srila Prabhupada asked us not to travel alone at night, I asked Kausalya, who recently separated from her husband, to go with me to Jaipur to purchase the deities for the New York temple. Srila Prabhupada gave us permission, and off we went to Jaipur. I gave away my round-trip ticket to one girl devotee who wanted to return to the States. We left New Delhi for Jaipur by train in December 1971. I do remember it was cold. We saw ladies wearing shawls, riding rickshaws to the temple. We were wearing our bed blankets. It was so cold in our rickshaws while we were heading to Rupa Goswami's Radha Govinda temple very early in a cold morning. We were so well received in Jaipur. We would attend arti ceremonies as Srila Prabhupada asked us to observe them, to see what we might also offer during our arti ceremonies. This is Radha Govinda in Jaipur. Aren't they beautiful? Look at that tilak covering his whole face. First two, just gorgeous. So we told him we observed perfume put on cotton swab and offered to the deity, and then handed back to the eagerly waiting devotees, standing and pushing to get the perfume to prasadam cotton swab. We noticed the deities were changed into pajamas at the last arti of the evening. Then we would get hot milk from the dudwallers on our way back to our residence. We were communicating with Srila Prabhupada a lot by mail. He told us to make like members and to get them to donate deities and send them to the temples in America, that we would put their names on the deity's base in a brass plate commemorating their donation. Well, I hadn't realized that it's required to travel around India with a passport. We had some difficulty about it with the authorities. Kausalya was a young, feisty devotee girl who would not let these authorities stop our service to Prabhupada. Due to her intense argument, they almost put her in jail. And I was accepted by these authorities due to her feistiness, and allowed to stay until my passport came. However, it all turned out to be a blessing due to the temple pujari vouching for us. He gave us residence with his family while we stayed in Jaipur, and he also introduced us to potential life members. We would have kirtan chanting Hare Krishna every night and make life members. Well, Kasalya continued making life members. I went to the Murti Wallas every day to see which deities reminded me of Rupa Goswami's Radha Govinda. The Murti Wallas had their own village. Murti means deity and Walla means the doer of. The Murti Wallas had their own village. Everyone there was working on marble to create statues of Murtis of demigods and other deities, including Radha Krishna. Here and there were unfinished forms. Only a few of them were of black marble. This place was very dusty. You can see all the marble dust about. And they're very busy, standing around talking. Yep, very busy. Some are. Let's look at the dust. And here's some beautiful deities, of course. None of them, I think, are Radha Krishna. The village is filled with marble. You can see rough and broken pieces and large pieces of marble everywhere with dust, marble dust swirling in the air. One plot, one shop, one after another. Deity merchants with their shops, one after another. There were sounds of craftsmen chipping away on the marble statues to form the precious deities. All their turbaned heads bobbed while carving as they chatted on in Hindi, filling the village with their sounds. Chip, 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 chat, chat, chat. Some were even singing. Deity carving has been going on in Jaipur for a very long time. India's history as stone carvers is recognized and dates back as far as 3200 BC. I finally found our Radha Krishna, our Radha Govinda, and asked the Murti Wallas to install conch shell eyes like Rupa Goswami's Radha Govinda's deities. Our Radha Govinda stayed on at the Murti Wallas workshop and waited patiently for their upcoming adventure. The people of Jaipur were so eager to have Srila Prabhupada come to Jaipur that they instigated a huge, huge Panda program. Everyone wanted to offer monies for something specific. The previous king and queen had a large palace across an immense grass field from the Radha Govinda temple. We were invited to go there. At one time, Rupa Goswami's Radha Govinda used to live there. I was going to tell you this point about the queen's donation, but I'll put that up for later. But this is her palace, which is Govindaji's temple's here, and across this huge lawn, much huger than it looks here, there is this palace of hers. And this is another part of it, very ostentatious or beautiful. We had experienced a huge Pandal program in New Delhi, so we knew what to expect for the Jaipur Pandal. This Pandal program was set up behind Rupa Goswami's Radha Govinda temple. There was a large empty lot there that facilitated this Pandal very well. The large tent was of many colors, well built with bamboo structures by the expert craftsmen of Jaipur. There were chandeliers and carpets and large stage up front for Radha Govinda's altar. And in the center was Srila Prabhupada's Vyasasan. To the right, Srila Prabhupada's devotees would be chanting and dancing in ecstasy. Many hundreds of Jaipur devotees would be attending. Due to Jaipur's devotion, the life members' donations, and their expert guidance, we were able to bring Srila Prabhupada and all the devotees that were in India to Jaipur. Everyone was given residential quarters, as well as all kinds of eatables for 8 days. It all started with a parade through the town of Jaipur. Srila Prabhupada was very nicely escorted. He was carried on a large bullock cart and sheltered with a fancy umbrella. Following were the many devotees that had come from all over India to join with Srila Prabhupada. There were bands, and a decorated elephant walked along in the parade as well. Many townspeople, ISKCON, and Indian devotees and life members followed along, chanting and dancing joyously in Srila Prabhupada's association. Here's a decorated elephant. Get some idea? Yeah, it's not the same one, but it's close. So here's a note from Shamasundar. He had written volumes of memoirs for Srila, about Srila Prabhupada, but this was from his time in Jaipur while he was serving Srila Prabhupada. So he says about the parade, the day after our arrival, the temple hosts, Srimati and Kasalya, staged a grand parade through the streets of Jaipur with Prabhupada seated on an open, decorated, four-wheeled wagon pulled by two huge white Brahma bulls, their horns spreading more than 3 feet. Prabhupada mounts the cart in front of his bungalow and laughs as his chariot barely squeezes through the palace gates and out into the pink city. Rohini Nandan holds an elaborately embroidered umbrella over Prabhupada's head as he cruises slowly around the city walls, followed by a couple hundred of loud singing and dancing devotees halting in the traffic as the cart is met by crowds of enthusiastic citizens. Lurching forward again as the police do their work. Prabhupada is sitting erect, draped with garlands, and he looks handsome and self-content as we pass the fabled pink walls. We all end up at that brightly lit and decorated pandal behind Govinda Devji's mandir. Srila Prabhupada lectured every morning and night from the pandal. Later in the evenings, he would give talks from this small rounded building next to the Radha Govinda mandir. I thought this was Rupa Goswami's, but he was probably passed by then, as his deities originally were in Vrindavan and they were moved here. But this small building is nearby, and this is also where Srila Prabhupada and his servants Nanda Kumar and Shamasundar stayed. They slept there. Malati and Saraswati would come every morning to cook for Srila Prabhupada. Bring it down a little bit. This one to show. Malati and Saraswati would cook here in the front. Okay, I just wanted to see there's some space. My grandson's here helping me out. That's why I'm doing all this movement. Okay, so Malati and Saraswati would come every morning to cook for Srila Prabhupada. Kasalya and I stayed at the Pujari's home with his family. Srila Prabhupada had stayed there with his family for 3 months before he went to America. Radha Govinda were finally brought to the pandal and set up on their altar with their crowns, jewels, dress, and Krishna's flute and garlands. Our Radha Govinda began accepting worship at the Jaipur Pandal program along with Srila Prabhupada's presence on January 14th for 8 consecutive days, ending on the 22nd of January, 1972. The altar and the stage with Srila Prabhupada's Vyasasan were well decorated with flowers. Srila Prabhupada's small Radha Krishna deities were at the feet of the soon-to-be Radha Govinda New York deities. I love this picture, even though it's not very a good photo. I love it. This is Radha Govinda. This is Prabhupada's New York, Prabhupada's small Radha Govinda with Gorkishore and Bhakti Vinod next to them. And this is their dress. We had simple things for them then. And they have their conch shell eyes, you can see there. They're very intense, but you know they're there for you. So this is in Jaipur. So the large, colorful pandal chandeliers were lit up and chairs were set full for the many expected attendees who would soon fill the area. We had a dedicated Jaipur devotee sit in attendance with the deities while they waited for the event to begin. The program began with Srila Prabhupada giving arati ceremony and a lecture, then ended up with an uproaring kirtan. After each night's program, everyone ate prasadam to their full satisfaction. Radha Govinda were guarded carefully throughout the night by a very dedicated Jaipur devotee. After the final program, Srila Prabhupada thanked Kasalya and I for taking such good care of Lord Chaitanya's movement and that we 2 women were able to do this nice service without husbands. That's Srila Prabhupada in Kasalya 50 years ago in Jaipur, being thanked by Srila Prabhupada. Okay. So Srila Prabhupada named the deities Radha Govinda due to their being the deities at the Panda program behind Rupa Goswami's Radha Govinda Mandir. Srila Prabhupada told me how to pack and create the Radha Govinda deities so they would arrive in New York safely. They soon arrived in New York, complete with flute, crowns, jewels, and dress from the Jaipur Pandal program to be greeted by Srila Prabhupada's. Wait a minute. I need every word, Cody. To be greeted by Srila Prabhupada's New York devotees. I shouldn't need every word that I do. Aren't they gorgeous? Are they? Krishna and Radha? Radha Govinda. Hari Bol, Hare Krishna. Love that blue on you. Okay. Radha Govinda came to New York because of Rukmini's desire, Kausalya's and my joyful service in Srila Prabhupada's directions. But it was really Srila Prabhupada's devotion that they followed him to America, to New York. After I purchased Radha Govinda and 3 other sets of deities, Srila Prabhupada sent me to Krishnagar to find a young man to teach me how to really make dioramas, not just cloth ones like I had done in LA, but this time out of clay. We did this in Mayapur, so Srila Prabhupada invited Bharadwaj, Rukmini, and Adadev to join the class. Haribo, your servant, Srimati Dasi, ACBSP, Seattle, 1968. Okay, now, if you'd like me to continue with Shama Sundar's notes about the Queen, this will clarify, and maybe one of you would like to read it. It's not very long, but it's about clarifying about the Prabhupada's the Queen, the relationship with the Queen. If I read it, you'll see a few pictures, but I can read it fast. Is that a nod? Somebody nod. Okay, that's enough. Okay. I got in touch with Shama Sundar. He was Srila Prabhupada's personal servant and secretary for several years. He experienced many intimate moments with Srila Prabhupada and traveled with him around the world several times. He wrote his memoirs in deep affection for 10 years and finally published them in 3 volumes called Chasing the Rhinos with the Swami. When reading, we find out that chasing rhinos means accomplishing really big projects and that they are ultimately only accomplished by Krishna's grace. Shama Sundar has sent me 6 pages of his pastimes in Jaipur. I didn't copy all of them. His pastimes with Jaipur with Srila Prabhupada. This was during the Panda program Kausalya and I were capable of able to accomplish due to Srila Prabhupada's and Krishna's mercy. So he explains in detail how the Maharani Devi, Gayatri Devi, wanted to donate some property, but it was denied. So Shama Sundar's notes are, later that night, Queen Gayatri's emissary arrived at the bungalow and invited Srila Prabhupada to a private discussion with Her Highness at the palace tomorrow morning. We were about to see the wisdom of Prabhupada's words spelled out in actual events. Maharani Gayatri Devi, now 52 years old, was herself the daughter of kings. Her father was second in line to the king of Kuch Behar in West Bengal, and her mother was Maratha princess from Baroda. In 1939, Gayatri Devi became the 3rd and favorite wife of Jaipur king Sawa Man Singh Bahadur, nicknamed Jai. She was a stunning beauty, voted by Vogue magazine as one of the world's 10 most beautiful women. After India's independence in 1947, the Maharajas remained a powerful force in Indian society, and both Jai and his wife entered politics. In 1962, Gayatri Devi was elected to the Lok Sabha, India's House of Lords, a post she held for 15 years. She represented the Swatantra Party in direct opposition to Indira Gandhi's Congress Party. As Prabhupada and I walked from his bungalow and through magnificent gardens to meet the Queen, I double-checked that my tape recorder was locked with a new cassette and fresh batteries. This should be a good one, he thinks. The huge 7-story city palace sits atop a slight rise at the south end of the 60-acre grounds. Govindaji's temple is at the north end. As we walked the distance between, Prabhupada enjoyed the fountains and regular gardens abloom with the winter flowers and strutting peacocks. We were met by a servant who led us up many stairs and down long hallways and into a majestic room. The queen greeted Prabhupada at the door in a flurry of what I guessed was Bengali. She looked at me, puzzled, and Prabhupada told her in English that I was his secretary, that a Swami should never be alone with such a beautiful woman. And we all laughed, breaking the ice. Isn't she beautiful? Very much. 10 most beautiful women in the world. And let's take a quick look at this temple of hers, Cody. This is her temple, another part of it. So the two of them sat on opposite ends of a couch, and I sat at a table between maybe 20 feet away, reached into my book bag and switched on the tape recorder. While they chatted in Bengali, I studied a Canaletto painting on the wall and looked out over the gardens below, pretending to ignore them. But as they spoke, I saw Gayatri become increasingly agitated and sad, and at times even burst into tears. Prabhupada treated her so gently, like a daughter who had suffered a loss. And I heard Sanskrit quotes interspersed with his fatherly commiserating and advice. An hour later, we left Maharani, and as we walked back through the halls of the palace, Prabhupada stopped to look at an old black and white photos on the walls, depicting days of royal glory past. As we returned through the gardens to Govindaji's temple, I said, Prabhupada, I recorded your conversation with Gayatri Devi, but what was that all about? He rounded on me and said, you must destroy that tape immediately. Oh, okay. And I punched rewind. As we walked on, the story gradually came out. She has many enemies. Her husband, the king, he was killed 2 years back in polo accident, and she misses him very much. Now she has no money to pay such big expenses. She is a strong lady, very great devotee, but these politics, they will be much trouble. She has offered me land to build one center here, somewhere behind Govindaji. Just you discuss and search out one plot. So in his room, Prabhupada elaborated on the story, saying that Jai's death in June 1970 at Cirencester Polo Grounds in Gloucester, England, was highly suspicious. And then on December 28, 1971, little more than 2 weeks ago, at that time, 50 years ago, a bill was passed by both houses of parliament to amend the Indian constitution, abolishing the ancient privileges, titles, and privy purse of Indians' royal families. No wonder she was so upset. Just like government at the present moment, we are allowing charity still, but most of the portion of the income they take away by income tax so that one may not have any power to give in charity. So at the present moment, the government does not declare that charity is illegal, but that time is coming very soon, as soon as there will be communist government. Our Indira Gandhi is cooperating with the Russians, and as soon as she's under the control of the Russians, gradually communism will be introduced. People are afraid of this attempt by Indira Gandhi. 3 years later, in 1975, Indira Gandhi declared a national emergency under the Maintenance of Internal Security Act and jailed political leaders opposed to the Congress Party. In a draconian act of revenge, Gayatri Devi was indicted on a trumped-up charge of tax evasion and sent to the notorious Tihar prison in Delhi, where 12,000 prisoners jammed a facility built for 5,000. When she emerged 5 months later, her political will was broken and she retired. The next morning after the early Pondal program, Prabhupada took his entourage for a walk to inspect the buildings Gayatri Devi had offered for an ISKCON temple. Behind Govinda Devji temple, there were acres of parkland called Jai Nawaz, with gazebos, roses, pomegranate trees, pools, and fountains. Straddling the gardens to the north was a large old building called Moti Mahal, with columns and pagodas. It looked like a small version of the main palace, but it was run down, unoccupied. Prabhupada loved it, but readily agreed that it would be very expensive to refurbish. He delegated Kasalya, Devananda Swami, and Rohini Nandan to open negotiations with the Queen's people to see if we could get it. Krishna is the greatest king. If he wants, money will be there. A month or so later, despite devotees' efforts to make a deal for the Jaipur royal buildings, political forces prevailed, and ultimately, the Queen's people withdrew her offer of temple land. So, if you are still interested in more details, they are in Shamasundar's 3 volumes of memoirs in his books, Chasing the Rhinos with the Swami. He asked me to offer that information. He depends on his books for support. Anyway, Hare Krishna Prabhu, enjoy your program. Thank you for this opportunity.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you so much. Very wonderful hearing about the history of Radha Govinda.
Thank you for inviting me for the opportunity.
Hare Krishna. All glories to Prabhupada.
Jai Jai.
Now we'll start Kirtan.
Okay.
Jayo Radhe Jayo Krishna Jayo Vrindavana Shri Govinda Gopinata Madana Mohana Jayo Radhe Jayo Krishna Jayo Vrindavana Shri Govinda Gopinata Madana Mohana Radhe Radhe.
Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam
Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandar Agom Vikamaniya Vishesha Shobham
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasa Sakalen Priya Priti Manti Vasyan Dipan Vikayanti Tiram Naganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadhu Jala Vigrahasya Govindam
Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami
Hare